Which movie blew your mind when you first saw it? The Sixth Sense. I went in knowing almost nothing about it. The theater I went to had some bad cut of the movie that you could see the boom mics in several scenes. But I still came out of it perplexed and amazed. I talked my girlfriend into going again. And warned her of the shoddy cinematography. But that issue was not seen again. Spirited Away. I was about 11 at the time I first saw it. And I watched it with my little sister on these tiny portable TV screens connected to a DVD player shoved under one of the car seats. These were the days before iPads and iPhones, on the way to a caravan site to pass the time. It was like nothing else I'd ever seen. And I'd never been so immersed in a film before. It's still one of my favorites now. As are other Ghibli films like Castle in the Sky and Kiki's Delivery Service. My sister thought it was Gattaca. I absolutely loved that movie. The whole concept, but mostly the relationship between the two brothers that one conceived and the one made. Aliens. First time I've walked out of a movie theater physically exhausted. Akira. Animation and soundtrack are sensational. You'll never find something like this in modern anime. The Game 1997. Michael Douglas and Sean Penn. Blew my mind the first time I saw it. Lord of the Rings. Return of the King. My God. That wasn't just going to the movies, it was a experience. Complete silence in my theater during the end scene. Not a dry eye in the place. Shutter Island. The details still blow my mind. A Clockwork Orange. Granted I was about 12, but it still really shook me. Especially by the fact that Alex DeLarge is the bad guy, yet you feel extremely bad for him when he's in prison. Children of Men. It changed my perspective of what you can do with cinematic storytelling. Without having the characters tell you the plot. Also it shows. You can have intense action scenes without the main character shoot the whole place down. It's really a masterpiece. Shawshank Redemption. Classic. The Prestige. That movie deserves more recognition. Blood Diamond. I went through so many emotions watching it, but what an incredible film. Arrival. Yes. There are problems with it. But still a pretty good movie. Whiplash just didn't expect a movie about a drummer in an orchestra to be interesting. And boy it was. Up in 3D. I wish I could experience that all over again. Mr. Nobody. Cabin in the Woods. What an absolute trip of a movie that had an entirely unexpected premise. Forrest Gump. The plotline. The soundtrack. The videography. The action scenes. Etc. I could keep going. From laughter to heartbreak. It still moves me like few movies ever have. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Wandered in with zero knowledge of the movie. Still one of my favorites. Moon. Not only because it's awesome but because they made a great movie on such a small budget. The only downside is most of that budget went to Kevin Spacey. The Thing. 80s version. First movie to scare me shitless. Still does. The puppetry is fabulous and the plot grips you the entire time. Also, no scenes. A bonus in my book. Gone Girl. Didn't read the book when the trailer came out. Heck, I didn't even bother watching the trailer. The movie amazed me so much that I stopped watching trailers before movies just to surprise myself. But Gone Girl got me so good. This will be a 1-point answer at best lol, but Billy Elliot. I mean, yes. I've seen infinitely more mind-blowing movies. More radical concepts. More shocking twists. But in terms of what actually blew me away, it was this movie I thought would just be a by-the-numbers fish-out-of-water story about a boy learning ballet. Which ended up being the first movie I can ever remember making me sob uncontrollably. Blew my mind because my perception going in did not meet the actual experience. To this day, still the one movie that always gets me emotional when watching. Run Lola Run and Source Code. Think Groundhog Day. But suspenseful. This is the end. After binging countless apocalypse movies recently. This is the one I see as most realistic outcome in the US. And they did not skimp on the extras. Even the director's commentary is great. You'll get a lot of mileage out of this one. Amadeus. After it was over, I just sat there silently for the longest time. The movie In Time with Justin Timberlake. They quite literally swapped out money for time. It should have been enough to put the world into perspective for people. The line that stuck out the most was, "No one person should be immortal if even one person has to die. No one person should be so wealthy if even one person has to go without." 12 Monkeys. But I was stoned AF. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Peak comedy. I may be a little older than most here. Seeing Highlander on VHS when it was first released was a treat. Fight Club. Brilliant. Alien. The gore and the alien itself makes it a really good movie. Back to the Future. Watched it as a 12-year kid on TV. And it impressed me so much I called the TV station to ask when they were going to air the second part. Back then there was no second part yet. It changed my view of the world. Shaped my idea of what I wanted to do in life and made me a lifelong science fiction fan. Going to name two, Interstellar and Inception. Nolan is honestly a genius. And Emo the best director in cinematic history. Gonna start with the former. The best score of any film I've ever watched. The sheer emotions evoked by the soundtrack fits every scene so perfectly. The casting is perfect, maybe with the exception of Anne Hathaway, who, while good, somewhat overdoes it at times. With each actor, Tress embodying their roles amazingly. Especially Matthew McConaughey. That one scene where he sees his kids grow up faster than he ages through the transmissions. Just gets the emotions going. The plot is amazing, emo. And is so intellectual. And challenges the viewer. Which is something that I love. My parents found it confusing. But as an avid fan of astrophysics, I loved it all. And all the attention to detail. Next to Inception. Score was amazing, again. Hans Zimmer, who also composed the Interstellar tracks, is just an amazing composer. Casting was perfect. Particularly good old Leonardo DiCaprio as well as Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy's line of "Don't be afraid to dream a little bigger. Darling" always gets me, face with tears of joy. The plot, again, was just sublime. It was, again, intellectual and challenges the viewer. Though I honestly have no idea why people call this film confusing all the time. While the film starts off somewhat confusingly. From then on, it's easy to follow, just disregard that one opening sequence until the end lol. As it does make sense at that point. I also love the somewhat open-ended ending. Overall, these two films simply blew me out of the water when I first watched them. And I wish that I could erase them from my memory so I could watch them for the first time again. There are certainly a few that stand out. Some have already been mentioned here, The Matrix, Say 7N, Fight Club. But a couple others come to mind, First Blood. I watched this about 5 years ago for the first time, thinking I was in for a typical Rambo movie. Was I ever surprised? The story was so much different than what I expected. And Stallone nailed that performance. Mad Max. Fury Road. I was already a fan of the original movies, okay. Beyond Thunderdome wasn't my cup of tea, but was still enjoyable. But Fury Road redefined what an action movie could be capable of. A simple story, which laid the foundation for great performances and jaw-dropping special effects. Independence Day. I was in the right place at the right time for this one. I was 15 when it came out. And I saw it in theaters on opening night. This movie ushered in all sorts of disaster movies. Some good and some bad. But this movie was special. I could rattle off a bunch more. Like 12 Monkeys, Memento, The Grey, John Carpenter's The Thing. Might be time for a movie marathon. Dark Water with Mark Ruffalo. FCKU. DuPont Chemicals. I've been obsessed with corruption films like The Big Short, Moneyball, Deepwater Horizon, Snowden. Hit me with any of your favorites. Star Wars. I was 10. All the FX available now are due to that movie. And a lot of the modern computer age. 2. People don't realize that. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That movie blew open so many doors. The interaction between live action and animation was incredible. Uses multiple IPs in one movie, Disney, Warner Brothers, etc. Having Donald and Daffy Duck together on stage was amazing. Seeing Mickey and Bugs interacting was cool too. Nothing like had been done at that time, and it sure hasn't happened again since. The Visit. Call me dumb. But the twist didn't even enter my mind throughout the entire movie until revealed. Later found out my parents watched it. And my dad called it within the first 10 minutes of the movie. 3 Identical Strangers. A. Must. See. I once dropped acid. Then watched 2 films consecutively. I had seen neither one before. The films were Akira and Apocalypse Now. It was an intense night. I don't think I've quite gotten over it. Nearly 30 years later,